Greetings, gamers. I'm Mark.
And I'm Manuel.
And welcome to Tabletop Throwdown.
Greetings, gamers. Welcome back to the channel. We have today for you part one of a special two-part set on a game called Test of Honor with our guest, Darryl. Mark, take it away.
Thank you, Darryl. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Darryl, you are a veteran gamer and hobby enthusiast. How long have you been in the hobby?
I've been in the hobby for about 30 years, on and off. I started way back with Rogue Trader.
Excellent. What are a few of your favorite systems?
Right now my favorite systems are 30K, Epic, of course Test of Honor, and 40K as well.
Nice. You are known in our hobby group to suddenly become inspired with a project, start sending us pictures on Facebook of this amazing detailed work you're doing, and what inspired you to jump into Test of Honor recently with your hobby project?
I rented too many Kurosawa movies on Amazon, and Test of Honor is the result.
It is an excellent result for sure. And on that note, let's go ahead and dive into the projects that you've been working on, show everyone the details, and let's start with the board itself.
All right. Well, the board actually started out as a note board from Walmart. It is a 2 feet by 3 feet long note board. And I started out by taking some cheap grit from Harbor Freight and Tool, and I just glued that down. Then it got a couple of coats of paint. I added in some of the larger texture from pebbles from the beach. And then I took Woodland Scenics foam scenery, and I just glued that down, and I have some larger tufts as well. Everything got a nice coat of glue when it was done to hold it so that it doesn't, flake off in your hands too badly.
This looks great. I love the texture of this board, the different colors put together. This actually looks like a nice open field or a meadow someplace. It's glorious. Well done.
Thank you. One of the things to consider if you ever make your own board is the variety of textures. When you look over, a field, it's not one uniform, texture. It has all kinds of different textures as different plants. Parts of it where it is not as well covered, so you have some exposed stones. When you're replicating that in miniature, a lot of people don't consider that, and they just put down one uniform like grass product, which gives you just a flat grass. Now, since this is a modular board and it's meant for multiple configurations, I couldn't put any undulations in. So instead, I just varied the textures into patches, and then I also varied the color of the patches as well to give it that kind of random, natural look.
It looks great.
Yeah, that's an excellent result. And a lot of people agonize when they're making boards about how they're going to cut it, how they're going to get it together. How much did it cost you at Walmart to just pick up this board?
This was $14.99 for a message board. It already had the frame included in it, so there was no cutting involved. It was a nicely finished frame, and it is hard to the touch. It's not something you're accidentally going to scrape. And if you really need to for storage, you can always just stick a wire on the back and put it up on the wall and have your picture of the ground.
I love it. I love it. Well, this is modular as you talked about, no undulations. Let's go ahead and break into some of the pieces that you did.
Sure.
Okay, we're back, and we have modular terrain, versatile for your convenience. Go ahead and tell us about what you did, Darryl.
All right, so on all of these, because it is a modular board, I went ahead and based them up on rounds. And these are just 4, 5, and 7-inch plywood rounds that you can get on Amazon, your local Michaels, or perhaps even Hobby Lobby. And they're versatile like that because it is a good size. It's not so large that it's going to take up the entire board, but it definitely makes its own distinct, where each one is its own little mini diorama. Now, all of the buildings you see come from 3D printed 3D alien worlds rather. They are printed on FDM and then painted just the standard way you'd paint buildings.
That brings up an interesting question, Darryl. So this game, Test of Honor, Does it have a bespoke line of miniatures and terrain, or is it miniatures agnostic?
It's completely miniatures agnostic. You can use any manufacturers, although Grey for Now Games, which actually puts out Test of Honor, has an incredible set of miniatures that are very, very detailed, and they're great to use with the game.
Fantastic.
All right, so this set is the market set, and it is just a little set of market stalls, and you can see here that it includes the vegetables and all of the stalls. It has the little hanging lights that have been painted, and I've even went ahead and added some water effects here in some of the barrels so that they're nice and complete. And as far as the grid on these goes, this is just the same exact grid that I used for the terrain board, which is just that very cheap grid from Harbor Freight, a couple of larger stones, and a couple of different scenic Woodland Scenics flockings.
Can you tell us what product you used for the water? Because that looks great.
For the water, that is just Woodland Scenics still water. And
water.
It needs to be poured in a couple of distinct pours. And it dries, it shrinks quite a bit, so you get a lot of cupping as far as where the capillary action's pulling it up your surface. But I think that just looks really nice, and it adds to the effect of it being actually water.
Yeah.
So that was the market set, and here these come from the Samurai farmhouse sets. And there's a couple of different ones that actually come with that set here. And I'll just go ahead and pull those all forward so that everyone can see them. So we have houses with two different styles of roofs. We have a well, and we have a rice wagon. Now the figure that is on here is 3D printed from Wargames Atlantic, I think actually, and they have a peasant set for specifically this period. Now the roofs are detachable if you would like to use them for interior gaming. They do have an interior set for them as well, although since I usually glue my roofs on for ease of storage and for transport, I don't have the interiors printed out. All right, and lastly, the road. The road came from Jeremy over at Black Magic Craft. And all this is just a recycled rubber entry mat for your house. And you just cut out your form. You get some really cheap acrylic that comes, a caulking gun from Lowe's. This is the pre-colored things. It's been described as the devil's peanut butter, and that's a very appropriate description of it after working with it. You rub the devil's peanut butter all over this, and then you put your grit on. You get your hands nice and wet, and you just kind of pat it down into the actual caulking that's there. And as it dries, it is flexible. As you can see, nothing comes off. So it's really great for storage. This one's just a tiny bit too long because I wanted to go across the entire board, but you can cut them into any shapes you like and have them match up into a random form of roads.
I've had people ask me about getting roads for games like Bolt Action and all the way down to 15mm games like Team Yankee. I've never heard of using this material before. It looks fantastic.
It looks very nice. I wish I could take credit for it.
Imitation is the highest form of flattery.
There you go.
Anything else you'd like to share about this process or the colors, or any comments, Manuel, about any questions you have about how he did certain elements of this terrain?
Well, as you will have seen in the close-ups, the shading and the blending and so forth on these is just amazing. I mean, the thatch, for instance, on the house over here just looks glorious. From a technique perspective, how did you achieve that shading?
Well, as far as, there's a couple of different forms of shadings, but on the thatch roof, which is probably the easiest one to go, I started out with airbrushing on a transparent ochre ink over a black and zenithal white highlighted piece. Then I went through and just dry brushed on a mustard yellow craft paint, and that pulled it up enough. I did leave it a little splotchy because when you look at this type of thatch roofing in real life, they weather at different rates. So you have some, when it's freshly applied, like it would be here, you have some spots that are really yellow and some spots that are a little more rusty and a little more tan color. As far as the coloring on the building, I like to do everything as easy as possible, so airbrush is the way that I do most of my large terrain painting like this. This was the easiest paint job I've done in a very long time for a building. I basically just started with the airbrush and I applied a transparent ochre to the light panels, and then I came in through with a transparent umber ink, and I just sprayed on the brown. And in order to get it just to be a slightly deeper, richer color, just an additional application of the umber. I came in with the rocks, and this is just gray and white dry brushed over at a couple different stages, and then my usual ground cover. It was probably took me about 2 hours or so to do from the time I put primer on to the time it was done.
Wow, wow. Well, it looks amazing. It looks glorious.
Thank you.
Okay, and here we are looking at some miniatures from your collection for this game. Go ahead and, Darryl, and introduce us some of the figures that you have here.
All right. So I have two separate forces here, specifically for the demo. I have the blues and the greens. And there's two types of figures here. There is the individual figures, which are, just your heroes or your lieutenants, or they have a special ability. And then there's the group of figures, which is an actual 3-group of figures, and these are more of your rank and files.
So before we go too much further, and not to get into the game too much, the bases there had led me to believe that this might be a formation type game, but evidently that's not the case. The bases are just for convenience, or do they designate anything special in the game?
It's mostly for convenience, but it also, as the game goes and as your troops start to degrade due to casualties, you actually physically remove a figure. And then, the performance of your base, you can look at it at a glance and compare it to the card that's there, and it'll tell you exactly what's going on.
And these 3 archers, a little more powerful, functioning together, can also be taken. You can just take 1 archer, for example, if you just need to round out your points. So you have some versatility.
Yeah, I see.
Now, most of the figures here are Dixon figures. Dixon has been making samurai for as long as I've been in wargaming. My very first game at a convention was 40K, and my second game was a samurai versus peasant mob using the old AD&D battle system rules. Ever since then, I've been in absolute love with the Dixon figures. They're a little chunky, and they have a slightly different proportion, but that's because they're hand sculpted. With 3D sculpting, the proportions are a lot truer, but they also have a tendency to get washed out. You kind of end up with some characterless, figures. It's like, this is a samurai. It's the same pose, the same everything as 100 other ones. Dixon offers a large variety of figures, including some adventurers, like the sumo wrestler here, and you have a large variety of mounted lords, and of course you have all of your other figures. As far as this goes, I have 2 additional companies here in addition to the Dixon figures, and that is going to be the Varnick figures. They do a series of figure around the Ginsen War, which is right at the end of the samurai period. And then, of course, we have the Grey for Now games. The Grey for Now games, this particular figure is actually a hybrid of plastic and metal, which is something that they're just trying out recently. The mounted figure itself is metal, and then the horse is plastic. It's a nice cost-saving measure, but it also has a lot of really good detail.
I noticed earlier that in fact, all of the Dixon figures are metal. They have a nice heft to them, like all metal miniatures do, which is really nice. Going on something that kind of has gone unsaid, it would appear that the game system is set in feudal Japan. It's a feudal Japanese era.
Yes. It's set in the Age of War. They have a very specific rule set that includes all of your various clans. It doesn't matter how a samurai is painted. I have green and blue just for visual purposes. But, samurai in Ashigaru could have a variety of armor styles, a variety of armor colors. There was no uniform, samurai armor where it said, all of my clan wears red and all of your clan wears blue. That's really just fiction when that happens. The main thing that could tell your opponents apart when they were actually on the battlefield were the sashimos. And Each one would have a Shashimo that would say which clan they were with and which unit they were with sometimes. So I've added in all of the Shashimos where they are drilled for it for the Dixon figures, which is one of the reasons I really like the Dixon figures, is a majority of them have the Shashimo. That you can wear that, you can look at a glance, you can say, oh look, there's my archers, there's my spearmen. You can just look at that from a 10 feet or 20 feet perspective.
Yeah, and I'll add in that Test of Honor is, as you're obviously describing, very historical leaning. They do have ninjas and some other options like that, but there's no fantasy figures in Test of Honor like there is in Bushido. There's no monsters, anything like that. So
right, and it is more cinematic samurai. It's not a really crunchy war game where you're sitting there and saying, I have a 12% chance of breaking through your armor that's lacquered with the red lacquer, as opposed to an 11% this is the blue lacquer. It's very cinematic. It's very skirmish level. The idea is not to get bogged down in unnecessary detail, but just to kind of just have fun, roll dice, and kill your opponent until they're dead.
Great, cool.
well, we're looking forward to that.
Right on.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of part one of this two-part series. This was the hobby section where we talked about the hobby elements of putting together a force and some terrain for the game. Stay tuned with us for part two, where we're going to go into an actual game demo of the game itself. As always, please, if you enjoyed what you saw today, like and subscribe down below. It really helps us out a lot. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thanks.